Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7. My name is McGlynn. First up tonight, our Ukraine update on day 560 of the Russian invasion. More than 900 people were killed or injured by Russia's widespread use of cluster munitions in Ukraine last year, propelling global casualty figures to record levels, according to the Cluster Munition Coalition. Cuba identified an alleged human trafficking ring aimed at recruiting its citizens to fight on Russia's side in the war in Ukraine, its foreign ministry has said. It was working to dismantle a trafficking network that operates from Russia to incorporate Cuban citizens living there. Ukraine's First Lady, Olena Zelenska, has spoken of the intense toll the war has taken on her family. This may be a bit selfish, but I need my husband, not a historical figure, by my side. But we stay strong. We have strength, both emotionally and physically, and I'm sure we will handle it together. Ukrainian lawmakers voted to restore a requirement that officials declare their assets, a measure sought by the International Monetary Fund, but included a loophole critics say dampens its effect. The Democratic and Republican leaders of the US Senate expressed support for continued assistance for Ukraine on Tuesday, as lawmakers returned to Washington facing a tight deadline for passing spending bills. President Joe Biden last month asked Congress to approve about $40 billion in additional spending, including $24 billion for Ukraine and other international needs, in a test of the country's willingness to keep supporting Ukraine as it fights the Russian invaders. A battlefield video circulated on social media appeared to show the destruction of a UK-supplied Challenger 2 tank in Ukraine, which would be the first time one of the tanks has been destroyed in combat. Russia's pipeline natural gas exports to the EU may fall to 21 billion cubic metres this year, almost two-thirds lower than last year and more than a six-fold drop from 2021, Russian state bank VEB said in a forecast. The Kremlin refused to confirm a possible summit between Russian President Vladimir Putin and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, which US officials have said they expect. Top story tonight. Private and voluntary sector staff working in adult social care, children's services, and those who deliver funded early learning and childcare will receive at least £12 an hour under a new pledge made by the First Minister. This uplift, announced in the First Minister's first programme for government, which will mean an increase of more than £2,000 a year for some staff in April 2024. The £12 minimum pay rate represents an increase of 10.1% from the £10.90 minimum rate that was introduced in April 2023 for eligible staff in ASC and ELC. For workers in child CS who previously received national minimum wage, this increase will represent a minimum increase in pay of 15.2% compared to April in 2023. The Scottish Government is working with COSLA and local authorities to support the implementation of this commitment and will set out further details in the coming months, building on the current guidance that supports implementation of the Real Living Wage commitment. Currently, the minimum paid wage for adult social care staff in Scotland is around £900 per year higher for full-time staff in Scotland than it is for their counterparts in England. First Minister Humza Yousaf said, "Up to 100,000 workers will benefit from this policy. They fulfil a vital role in society and we are immensely grateful for the contribution they make. Pay and conditions are of great importance in the well-being and retention of the social care workforce, and that is why we are committing to make sure staff in these vital services are paid at least £12 an hour." 4 out of 5 people who will benefit from this uplift in pay are female. Increasing pay not only helps the workforce in question, but will also help achieve our wider priorities on child poverty, fair work, and post-COVID recovery in the health and care sector. The number of excess winter deaths in the UK caused by living in a cold, damp home climbed by about a third last winter, after more than 1 million vulnerable households missed out on government energy bill support, MPs have heard. Fuel poverty campaigners told a parliamentary committee today that despite relatively mild weather, the number of excess winter deaths had climbed to 4,706, up from 3,186 a year earlier, as a result of the energy cost crisis. Simon Francis, a coordinator at the End Fuel Poverty Coalition, added that the number of excess winter deaths was likely to rise again this winter because of higher levels of energy debt, while vulnerable households were forced to hope for mild weather. MPs also heard that more than 1 million vulnerable households missed out on the government's financial support for their energy bills last winter and were forced to rely on dangerous coping mechanisms, such as going without heating. Adam Scorer, the chief executive of the fuel poverty group National Energy Action, said vulnerable households have been forced to turn off their heating or opt not to wash or eat to cope with impossible levels of debt, which led to an explosion in the mental health crisis over the last winter. The NEA added that more than £400 million in government funds earmarked to help the most vulnerable pay their energy bills last winter has been left unspent. The groups appeared before the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero Select Committee to give evidence on the UK's preparedness for the coming winter. Gillian Cooper, the head of energy at Citizens Advice, said the consumer champion had managed almost 130,000 calls for emergency help last winter, which was up significantly from the winter before. All the forecasts from our data are suggesting that it's going to get worse this year, Cooper added. The consumer groups called on the government to use the £440 million underspent to offer extra support to vulnerable households, which are expected to face stubbornly high bills and increasing energy debt this winter. The SNP's Westminster Treasury spokesperson, Drew Hendry MP, has added his voice to the calls for the UK government to reintroduce a £400 energy bill rebate for all households from October. Speaking in the House of Commons, Hendry laid the blame for the skyrocketing inflation with the UK government's austerity agenda. The SNP's call to support the most vulnerable this winter comes amid a growing number of organisations calling for further UK government assistance with household energy bills. Drew Hendry MP said, "The UK government must urgently support families and listen to leading charities by reintroducing the £400 energy bill rebate for all households from October." Brexit and austerity cuts have emptied the pockets of families, all the while that Sunak and Starmer stick their heads in the sand. Proposed welfare changes that the government says will help disabled people benefit from the chance to work from home could lead to many losing out on almost £400 a month in support, campaigners say. The Work and Pension Secretary, Mel Stride, announced a consultation on changes to the Work Capability Assessment on Tuesday, saying it was aimed at ensuring no one who can work is permanently written out of this country's strong labour market story. The government plans to update the definitions used to assess claimants' readiness for work to take account of shifts including home working. The Work Capability Assessment does not reflect how someone with a disability or health condition might be able to work from home, yet many disabled people do just that, Stride told MPs. Disability charities and employment experts welcomed the focus on getting more people into jobs, but pointed out that assessing claimants are as ready to prepare for work meant they would lose out on £390.06 a month in extra support and face tough conditions, such as having to attend a job centre regularly. Tony Wilson, the director of the Institute for Employment Studies, a think tank, said, "They're presenting this as about extending employment support to more people, but that is a red herring. This is primarily about trying to save money." He suggested extra support to help disabled people into work should not come with such stringent conditions. DWP are so stuck in the mentality of delivering a highly conditional requirements-based social security regime that when it wants to extend support, its immediate thought is, how do we require more people to attend job centres? Analysis published on Wednesday by the Resolution Foundation suggested that those affected were likely to be lower-income individuals. 3/4 of those in receipt of means-tested health-related benefits are in the bottom half of the income distribution, and 1/3 of disabled people were materially deprived in 2020 to 2021, almost 3 times the share among the non-disabled population. Resolution's Louise Murphy said, "Although the Scottish disability payment is not affected by these changes, disabled people in Scotland who rely on universal credit are likely to be subject to the DWP Work Capability Assessment changes." The British Chambers of Commerce has marginally upgraded its 2023 GDP forecast to 0.4%, but warns that economic activity will remain very weak throughout 2024 and 2025. The UK economy remains on course to avoid a technical recession, but growth is likely to remain so feeble that it will be hard to spot the difference. A growth rate of 0.4% is expected for the whole of 2023, dropping to 0.3% in 2024, and nudging up only slightly to 0.7% in 2025. Consistently low economic growth of this nature is comparable to previous periods of economic shocks and recessions, such as the oil crises of the 1970s and the financial crash of 2008. Core inflation is proving sticky, but while BBC research shows inflation is the top concern for UK firms, fewer businesses now expect their prices to rise over the coming months. The forecast for the CPI rate therefore remains unchanged at 5% in Q4 2023. However, CPI is now forecast to take longer to return to the Bank of England's 2% target, only reaching this goal in the last quarter of 2025. While the first ONS estimate of GDP growth for Q2 2023 was better than expected, the BCC forecast expects the next two quarters to flatline, leading to overall growth of 0.4% for the year. This is in line with the Bank of England's forecast. However, with interest rates now predicted to remain higher for longer, the BCC expects the economy to grow by just 0.3% in 2024 and 0.7% in 2025. This downward revision for the next 2 years, from the BCC's previous Q2 forecast of 0.6% and 1% respectively, reflects the negative impact of inflation and interest rates on disposable income and household spending, and their dampening effect on overall business investment. Commenting, SNP economy spokesperson Drew Hendry, MP, said, "This report emphasises how the UK government has driven the economy into the ground and hammered household incomes through their austerity agenda and the unmitigated disaster of Brexit. The predictions in this report are dire and highlights the ineptitude of the UK government's economic policies. As a result of Westminster decisions, households and businesses face at least a further 2 years of very weak economic activity, and the UK economy continues to teeter on the edge of recession. It is no surprise that a key recommendation of the report is the strengthened UK-EU cooperation to increase bilateral investment levels. Scotland was dragged out of the EU despite overwhelmingly voting to remain. We continue to see the devastating economic effects of that decision by the UK government." The UK Civil Aviation Authority is to launch an independent review into the technical issue NATS faced on Monday the 28th of August that saw hundreds of flights delayed and cancelled. NATS's preliminary technical report sets out the causes of the issue and actions taken to rectify it and mitigate the effects. It found that the incident occurred due to an anomaly that forced the system to stop processing flight plans. The system was closed to maintain safety and required manual operation to continue service. The UK Civil Aviation Authority will now independently review the wider issues around the system failure and how NATS responded to the incident. If there is evidence that suggests NATS may have breached its statutory and licensing obligations, the UK Civil Aviation Authority will take any appropriate steps. The review will also set out lessons to be learned for the future for the benefit of consumers and the industry. The scale of the disruption that followed was significant and meant some passengers faced long delays, in some cases waiting several days for alternative flights. Airlines worked around the clock, putting extra capacity to resolve the issue. Airlines have obligations to look after their passengers in these circumstances and bring them home as soon as possible. NATS shared its preliminary technical report on the failure with the UK Civil Aviation Authority on Monday the 4th of September, and the regulator sent it to the Secretary of State for Transport, Mark Harper, and Aviation Minister, Baroness Veer, outlining its next steps. Rob Bishton, Joint Interim Chief Executive at the UK Civil Aviation Authority, said, "The initial report by NATS raises several important questions, and as the regulator, we want to make sure these are answered for passengers and industry. If there is evidence to suggest NATS may have breached its statutory and licensing obligations, we will consider whether any further action is necessary." Details of the independent review will be published by the end of September in 2023. At least 11 people have died in Turkey, Greece and Bulgaria as flash floods from torrential rainstorms turned rivers into torrents, swept away bridges and inundated streets, homes and public buildings. Greece's climate crisis and civil protection minister Vasilis Kikilias said after an emergency cabinet meeting, "This is the most extreme phenomenon in terms of the maximum amount of rain in a 24-hour period since records began in the country." In eastern Greece, one man died in the coastal town of Volos when a wall collapsed on him, and the body of an 87-year-old woman was discovered in the nearby Pelion area on Wednesday, where a further 4 people have been reported missing. At least 6 villages in and around the Pelion mountain range have suffered huge damage, local media has reported. In Turkey, 6 holidaymakers were carried away by a torrent that raged through a campsite in the northwestern Kirkcaldy province near the border with Bulgaria. 2 bodies were recovered on Tuesday night and 2 more on Wednesday morning. Authorities said more than a dozen holidaymakers were on the site when the floods hit, sweeping away several bungalows. They said a search for the 2 missing holidaymakers was continuing uninterrupted. Turkish television footage showed rescuers carrying a young girl and an adult to safety from waters that reached waist high in some areas. 2 people were killed in Istanbul. Several underground stations were closed and about a dozen people were rescued after being stranded inside a flooded city library. The overnight storm, which followed an unusually dry summer, flooded streets and stations and swept away cars and city market stalls. The victims in Istanbul were a 32-year-old Ghanaian citizen trapped in a ground floor apartment in the Küçükmeçke district, and a 57-year-old woman who died after being swept away. Elsewhere in the city, diners in a restaurant climbed onto the roof to escape the rising waters. The surging floodwaters affected more than 1,750 homes and businesses in the city, according to the governor's office. They included a line of shops in the İkiteli district, where the deluge dragged parked vehicles and mud into furniture stores. Further north, on Bulgaria's southern Black Sea coast, the body of a missing tourist was recovered from the sea on Wednesday, raising the death toll from flash floods in the country to 3. Border police vessels and drones were searching for another 2 people still listed as missing, while the area suffered power blackouts and authorities warned people not to drink tap water because of contamination from the floodwaters. TV footage showed cars and camper vans being swept out to sea in the southern resort town of Sarajevo, where authorities declared a state of emergency. Most of the rivers in the region burst their banks and several bridges were destroyed. In a US court filing, attorneys for special counsel Jack Smith have said that Donald Trump is making daily extrajudicial statements that threaten to prejudice the jury pool in the federal criminal case dealing with his efforts to overturn the 2020 election. Trump has not hesitated to criticize the US District Judge Tanya Chutkan, who is overseeing the case. He has called her highly partisan and very biased and unfair, pointing to her comments sentencing one of the January 6 rioters. Trump has also attacked Smith, calling him deranged and someone with unchecked and insane aggression. Judge Chutkan has warned Trump's attorneys about his comments. She has also imposed a protective order in that case, limiting the documents and other materials can be made with the public. During a hearing in August, she cautioned John Lauro, one of Trump's lawyers, that he and his client should take special care in their public statements about this case. She said, "I will take whatever measures are necessary to safeguard the integrity of these proceedings." Smith's complaint shows the extent to which Trump's social media activities, often typified by conspiracy-laden rants, are a serious issue for US prosecutors and risk exposing him to sanctions from the judge, who last week set a trial date of the 4th of March 2024, in an effort to keep the case moving. Trump has faced admonitions in his other cases too, with a condition of his release in a separate prosecution in Georgia being that he avoid intimidating co-defendants, witnesses, or victims. Smith's comments came at the end of a brief filing on Tuesday that is part of a dispute over how sensitive materials in the case should be handled. Trump attorneys argued that they are entitled to 14 days to respond to any request to file something under seal, while the special counsel's office said such a requirement would grind litigation in this case to a halt. Judge Chutkan ruled today that she would give parties in the case a chance to respond to requests under seal, though she said the reply may have to come faster than 14 days. Separately today, Trump's forthcoming civil trial over comments about the writer E. Jean Carroll and her allegation that he raped her will only concern how much more he has to pay. U.S. District Court judge in the area, Lewis Kaplan, said Trump was adjudicated a rapist and ruled that Trump's comments were therefore libelous. The trial, set for January, is the second in the case. In the first earlier this year, Trump was found liable for defamation and sexual abuse regarding Carroll's allegation that he assaulted her in the changing rooms of a New York department store in the mid-1990s. He was then fined $5 million. The forthcoming trial concerns remarks Trump made in 2019 while president, after Carroll first publicly claimed that he attacked her in the luxury store dressing room. Judge Kaplan said that by finding Trump had sexually abused Carroll, the jury in the first trial effectively established that his 2019 statements were also false and defamatory. Progress to identify, assess and fix unsafe cladding on Scotland's medium and high-rise multi-residential buildings will be accelerated under plans to safeguard homeowners and residents in this year's programme for government. A cladding remediation bill will give ministers new powers to remediate buildings with unsafe cladding that present a risk to life. This will support the delivery of the cladding remediation programme and help to speed up the remediation process. Ministers will also seek the transfer of powers to create a new building safety levy, equivalent to the UK government's building safety levy for England. The levy will ensure that developers in Scotland contribute financially to tackling cladding issues. Housing Minister Paul McGlynn said, "We are determined to make sure that buildings with potentially unsafe cladding are assessed and remediated, and homeowners and residents continue to be at the heart of our cladding remediation programme." This programme has made good progress in identifying and assessing safety issues, but there is still more to be done. Legislation will help take the next steps in this important work, and we will address barriers to remediating unsafe cladding that present a risk to life and ensure it can be fixed as efficiently as possible. It is also right that those who have profited from the construction of buildings with unsafe cladding contribute to the cost of fixing them. One way we will do this is by seeking powers to introduce a new levy on developers equivalent to the building safety levy in England, which will ensure that the sector makes a fair contribution. We also remain committed to working with developers to agree a contract setting out their commitments to support the remediation of buildings that they developed. The Scottish Government has today confirmed funding of a £140 million that will see the delivery of the East Kilbride Enhancement Project. In addition, the Transport Minister, Fiona Hislop, confirmed that the Barrhead route electrification and associated station improvement works remain on track for completion in December of this year. This latest funding commitment demonstrates continued progress with the Scottish Government's rolling programme of railway electrification as a key element of transport decarbonisation. The scope of the East Kilbride project includes new electrification between Busby Junction and East Kilbride, new platform Hare Myers station with accessible station building and footbridge with lifts as part of the new intermodal transport hub. A new accessible station building at East Kilbride Station with enhanced passenger facilities and platform extension. New accessible station footbridge with lifts at Giffnock Station and platform extension. New footbridge and additional station entrance at Clarkston Station. New footbridge at Busby Station. 1.4 kilometres extension of Hare Myers Loop, creating an extended double-track section. The funding allocated to this project is £96.3 million, which is additional to the previously allocated £43.5 million funding for development and advanced works, which are already being delivered, alongside the Barrhead electrification works, bringing the total project funding to £139.8 million. Ms Hislop said, "I am very pleased to confirm that I have now approved full funding for the completion of the East Kilbride Enhancement Project. This will deliver electrification of the route, a new intermodal transport hub at Hare Myers, a new accessible station at East Kilbride, accessibility works at other stations, and a 1.4 kilometre extension of the Hare Myers double track section to enhance operational performance and flexibility of service on the route. This £140 million commitment from the Scottish Government will contribute to our net zero objectives and will enable the introduction of greener, faster and more comfortable electric trains on the route from December 2025. In addition, the Glasgow to Barrhead line will see electric services operating on the route from December 2023. I would like to thank passengers for their patience during the recent route closure to allow the rapid and efficient delivery of electrification works by Network Rail and its partners. Well, that's it for this evening, but before I go, I just want to remind you that here at Broadcasting Scotland, we depend on the generosity of our supporters. So to everyone who has donated, and to everyone who has signed up to make a regular monthly payment, thank you very much. Our programmes will always be free to view. However, if you can afford £5 a month, please consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter. Our need to reach our £30,000 target to pay our bills is still pressing. However, the generosity of our supporters has given us a little more time. We have now raised nearly £16,500 and we are able to continue making programmes for the next few weeks. But our need to raise the remaining £13,500 is still urgent. Good night and thank you for watching.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Lewis McGlynn.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Saoirse Healy.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Donald C. Stewart. Broadcasting Scotland is Scotland's independent broadcaster, providing factual news, reporting on the issues important to the people of Scotland.
We are committed to public service broadcasting, and with your support, we will produce even more programmes.
Provide opportunities for young people interested in media production and broadcasting, and challenge preconceptions of what Scottish media looks like, amplifying Scotland's voice and reflecting its communities.
We can already deliver high-quality live news, and we will create the highest quality programmes for you to enjoy. But we can only do that with your support.
So please subscribe to and share our channel or donate to Broadcasting Scotland via the link in the description. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.